Welcome to our deep dive today, where we're looking at a really fascinating idea, and that is how to improve your marriage without talking about it.
Right.
We've got a few different sources today we're going to be pulling from.
Yes.
We've got excerpts from the book, How to Improve Your Marriage Without Talking About It,
Okay.
by Patricia Love and Stosny. We've got a summary from Library Book. And we even have this Reddit post with some interesting personal anecdotes about using this approach.
Fascinating, right? Most relationship advice is just talk, talk, talk.
Yeah.
But this book's saying, well, maybe sometimes actions speak louder than words.
Yeah, I think it really challenges a lot of conventional wisdom about how relationships are supposed to work.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about those unspoken dynamics that can either really bring you together or tear you apart.
For sure.
So where do we even begin with this whole actions over words approach?
Well, the book's argument is that all this relationship talk can actually be counterproductive.
Really?
Yeah. So, imagine you're always dissecting every little issue in your relationship.
Right.
Always trying to hash it out. Come to some kind of solution through talking.
Yeah.
That can create a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Particularly for men.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, it's kind of like you're putting your relationship under a microscope.
Right.
And nobody wants to live under that kind of scrutiny.
No.
So if we're not supposed to talk everything out, what's the alternative?
Wow.
I know that the Reddit post mentioned a really interesting anecdote about a goblet.
Yes.
That was given as a wedding gift.
Yeah. So if a couple's feeling disconnected, they fill the goblet with wine.
Okay.
And offer it to each other. And that's just like this silent signal to come back together again.
That's a really powerful image.
I think so.
I love that.
It's about finding ways to reconnect without having to have these drawn out conversations.
Right. Just a simple action that says, I see you.
Right.
I want to be close to you. Let's come back together.
Yeah.
So, the book and the Reddit post both mention this idea that men and women experience things like fear and shame very differently.
Very differently.
So how does that play into this whole actions over words thing?
Well, that's a crucial point.
Okay.
And the book talks about how men and women perceive threats in different ways. And so men are much more sensitive to shame.
Okay.
Feelings of inadequacy.
Got it.
While women tend to be driven by a fear of abandonment or deprivation.
Okay, so how do those different fears actually manifest in a relationship, though?
So think about this. A woman, right, might try to resolve a conflict through talking.
Okay.
Because they're afraid of that disconnection. A man, on the other hand, might see all that talking as criticism.
Oh.
And that can trigger his fear of failure.
Right. So it's not that he doesn't care.
Right.
It's that he's trying to...
He doesn't know how to handle it.
Right. He's trying to run away from those feelings.
Yeah. And the book talks about specific behaviors that can really make men feel ashamed.
So if we're going to try to improve our marriages without having all these, potentially explosive conversations, we need to figure out what those behaviors are.
Exactly. We need to know what to avoid.
Right.
Awareness is key, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And, the Reddit post even listed some of these shaming behaviors.
Like what?
Excluding your partner from decisions.
Okay.
Correcting them all the time.
Got it.
Offering unsolicited advice.
Wait, giving advice can be shaming.
Well, if your partner feels like you're always pointing out their flaws.
Oh, okay.
Or saying they can't do anything wrong.
It's like you're chipping away at their confidence instead of building it up.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid these behaviors and connect more positively?
Well, that's where the book's focus on actions over words comes in.
Okay.
It has all kinds of tips for building a stronger marriage without all the talking and arguing.
So what are some of the key takeaways?
Well, the book highlights three main areas.
Okay.
Physical touch, shared activities, and something they call silent companionship.
Interesting.
And these are really the foundation for a deeper connection without words.
So let's dive into each of those areas.
Okay.
And see how we can put these principles into practice.
Sounds good.
Starting with physical touch. What's the magic there?
Well, just think about it. A hug, a hand, a touch on the shoulder.
Right.
These are very primal ways of communicating affection. Reassurance.
Yeah.
They create a sense of safety and intimacy. And I think that can be really powerful.
Yeah.
Especially for men who might not be as comfortable expressing themselves with words.
It's like you're bypassing those communication barriers.
Exactly.
And going straight to the heart.
Right to the heart.
Okay. And what about shared activities? How do those help strengthen a marriage?
So, imagine you and your partner cooking a meal together,
Okay.
working on a project, or just going for a walk side by side.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily talking about your relationship,
Right.
but you're building a sense of partnership through that shared experience.
It's like you're creating a shared history, a collection of positive memories
Right.
that strengthens your bond.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got hugs for de-stressing, shared activities for reconnecting.
Yep.
What about just quiet moments at home when you're both doing your own thing?
Yeah.
How does silent companionship strengthen your bond?
Well, instead of going to separate rooms,
Okay.
try sitting together in the same space.
Okay.
Even if you're reading or working on different projects,
Yeah.
you're not interacting directly,
Right.
but you're choosing to be near each other,
Right.
sharing that quiet space.
I love that.
It's very powerful.
Yeah. It's like you're saying, I'm content just being near you,
Yeah,
even in silence.
exactly.
So we've got these three core elements, physical touch,
Yeah.
shared activities,
Yeah.
and silent companionship. How do we start actually putting these into practice in our daily lives?
That's a great question, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay. But before we move on, I also want to hear how this approach can help with some more
Sure.
specific challenges.
Yeah.
Like stress, intimacy issues, even decision making.
Okay.
Can actions really address those deeper issues?
They can. And the book has some really cool insights into how these actions over words principles
Okay.
can apply to even the toughest relationship problems.
Can't wait to hear about it.
But first, why don't we give our listeners a moment to reflect?
Okay.
Think about those three elements: physical touch, shared activities, and silent companionship.
Okay.
Which one resonates with you the most?
Yeah.
And how can you maybe incorporate that into your relationship?
That's a great question for all of us to think about.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. We always think talking is the way to fix things in a relationship.
Yeah.
But what if there's like another language?
Right.
A way to connect without words?
Yeah.
Going back to basics.
I know, it's like we've overcomplicated things.
Right.
Okay, so let's get practical.
Right.
Let's say you come home from a long day at work.
Yeah.
You're exhausted, maybe a little on edge.
Yeah.
How do you de-stress and reconnect with your partner without like launching into a big vent session?
Well, instead of unloading all your frustrations the second you walk in the door,
Right.
just try giving your partner a long, silent hug.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like a reset button.
It is.
You're not dismissing your feelings,
Right.
but you're connecting first
Right.
before you even try to process anything verbally.
Exactly. And for the partner receiving that hug,
Yeah.
they feel needed, appreciated,
Right.
without having to do anything.
Yeah.
Just being there.
Okay, so that's a great example for stress.
Mhm.
But what about those times when you're feeling disconnected,
Yeah.
but you're not really sure how to bridge that gap?
Mm-hmm.
Talking about it feels daunting. So how do you use actions to reconnect without words then?
That's where shared activities come in.
Okay.
You know, maybe you and your partner used to love playing board games together
Okay.
or going for bike rides.
Uh-huh.
Whatever you enjoy, suggest doing one of those things together.
Right.
Not as a way to fix anything,
Right.
just to reconnect.
I love that. Just to enjoy each other's company.
Exactly. And that
Uh-huh.
shared joy, that feeling of being in sync,
Yeah.
that can create a powerful connection.
Yeah. Even without saying a word.
Right.
Okay, so hugs for de-stressing,
Mm-hmm.
shared activities for reconnecting.
Uh-huh.
What about those quiet moments at home when you're both just doing your own thing?
Yeah.
How can silent companionship strengthen that bond in everyday situations?
So instead of going to separate rooms,
Okay.
try sitting together.
Uh-huh.
Even if you're reading or working on different projects,
Okay.
you're not interacting directly,
Right.
but you're choosing to be near each other.
It's like you're creating this unspoken sense of togetherness.
Yeah.
Like we're in this together,
Exactly.
even if we're not talking.
It is.
I love that.
And it can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
You know, think about couples who've been together for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
They're often very content just being in each other's presence,
Right.
even in silence.
It's beautiful, actually.
It is.
It's about just appreciating those quiet moments,
Yeah.
you know, and recognizing that they can be just as valuable
Absolutely.
as those times when you're out having adventures or
Right.
having these big, deep conversations.
Mhm.
You know, this makes me think about a point that the book made
Yeah.
about creating this culture of appreciation in your marriage.
Yes, a culture of appreciation.
Can you explain what that is
Yeah.
and how it relates to this whole actions over words thing?
It's about actively showing your partner that you value them,
Okay.
appreciate them.
Yeah.
You want to make them happy.
So it's not about, grand pronouncements or expensive gifts.
No, not at all.
It's more about those small, consistent actions.
Right.
That really demonstrate your love and care.
It's a shift in focus from criticism to appreciation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that can make a big difference in your relationship.
Yeah.
Imagine both partners making an effort to show each other that they care.
Mm-hmm.
It creates this positive feedback loop.
Yes.
Where those expressions of appreciation are reciprocated.
Right. And it strengthens the bond even more.
Exactly. It builds a strong foundation.
Yes.
Even when things get tough.
Now, I know some listeners might be thinking this all sounds great.
Yeah.
But what about those big issues that you can't just solve with a hug or a shared activity? What about, conflicts, disagreements?
Mm-hmm.
Those times when you need to make important decisions together.
That's a good point.
Can actions really address those more challenging situations?
Well, the book actually offers some really good advice on how to apply these principles to those tougher situations as well.
Okay.
It's about finding that balance between action and communication.
Got it.
Sometimes the best way to resolve an issue is through a combination of both.
Okay. I'm intrigued. I want to hear more about how this approach can work in those more complex situations.
Okay, let's say you and your partner are disagreeing about something, like finances or parenting decisions.
Okay.
Instead of immediately jumping into a debate, try acknowledging their perspective first.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, even if you don't agree with it.
So instead of saying you're wrong,
right,
or that's a terrible idea, you might say, I understand why you feel that way.
Exactly.
I see your point.
Yeah, just validating their feelings can really de-escalate the situation.
It shows that you respect them, even if you don't necessarily agree.
Exactly.
It creates this safe space for a more productive conversation.
Right. You're not attacking each other.
Yeah.
You're working together as a team.
So it's not about avoiding conflict.
Right.
It's about approaching it in a more constructive way.
Exactly.
All right. So we've talked about how this approach can help with stress, disconnection, conflict resolution. What about intimacy? Can actions really make a difference there too?
Absolutely. And it's not just about sex.
Right.
It's about all those nonverbal ways to be close.
Okay.
To create that spark.
So what are some examples of actions that can foster intimacy without having to have a big conversation about your feelings?
Think about cuddling on the couch.
Okay.
Holding hands while you're walking.
Yeah.
Giving each other back rubs.
Right.
Just making eye contact across the room.
It's those little touches.
Yeah.
Those non-verbal expressions of affection.
Right. And sometimes they're even more meaningful than words.
Yeah.
Because they're so genuine.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about how this actions over words approach, it can help with stress, disconnection, conflict resolution, and intimacy.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what about those times when you do need to have those tough conversations?
Right.
Is there ever a time when talking is absolutely necessary?
Of course there are times when you need to talk.
Okay.
But even then, you can use actions to create a better environment for those conversations.
So it's not about replacing communication altogether.
No.
It's about using actions to kind of set the stage for more effective communication.
Exactly. You're building a foundation of trust and understanding.
Yeah.
Which makes it easier to have those tough conversations.
Yeah.
Without all the blame and defensiveness.
I see what you mean. So you're strengthening your connection through actions.
Right.
And then that makes it easier to talk when you need to.
That's the beauty of this approach.
It's not all or nothing.
Right.
It's about finding that balance.
Exactly.
It's interesting. We've been talking about all these actions.
Yeah.
But if you're intentionally changing your behavior,
right,
based on what you're reading in this book, won't your partner kind of notice that and think it's weird?
That's where subtlety comes in.
Okay.
You don't want to be like, honey, I read this book and now I'm going to hug you strategically.
Right.
It's got to be organic.
It's got to be authentic.
Right. It should feel like a natural part of your relationship.
Right. Like you're rediscovering these little gestures.
Yeah.
Okay. So if someone's listening to this and they want to try this approach, where do they even begin?
I would say start small.
Okay.
Choose one area you want to focus on, like maybe physical affection, or carving out time for a shared activity.
Right.
Or just being more present with your partner.
Got it.
Don't try to change everything at once.
Right.
Just pick one thing and see how it goes.
Like building new habits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, it's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about making an effort.
One of the things I found most interesting about this book is this idea that you can actually improve your marriage without having to have those like big, long, deep conversations.
It is a different way of looking at things.
It is.
It's not that you should never talk.
Right.
But sometimes actions can be more effective.
Yeah, especially when it comes to those really sensitive areas.
Right, where words can sometimes just make things worse.
Yeah, so I think the key takeaway here is that you really can improve your marriage without talking about it constantly.
Yeah.
It's about understanding those differences between men and women, recognizing the power of nonverbal communication, and finding those little ways to connect through actions. And it's not about ignoring problems or pretending everything's fine.
It's about finding a better way to communicate.
And build a stronger relationship.
And it doesn't have to be complicated.
Right.
It's the little things that make a difference.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a question.
Okay.
What is one small action you can take today to show your partner that you love and appreciate them?
Without saying a word.
Maybe it's a hug when they walk in the door.
It could be.
Maybe it's a helping hand with a chore.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just sitting down next to them on the couch.
Just being present.
Yeah.
The possibilities are endless.
And if this whole concept really intrigues you, we highly recommend you check out the book.
Absolutely.
How to Improve Your Marriage Without Talking About It.
It's full of great advice.
Yeah, it's a really interesting read.
Remember, sometimes the most powerful expressions of love are the ones spoken not with words, but with the language of the heart.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
That's a great way to end this deep dive.
I think so too.
Oh,